This is the Sri Ramana Maharshi satsang, a time to listen, reflect, and deeply meditate. Know yourself and be always free and at peace. Welcome. I'm Richard Clarke, hosting this satsang. I'm not a guru or a teacher. Like you, I love this teaching and want to share it. I'm reviewing and commenting on the book Talks with Sri Ramana Maharshi, dialogues recorded by Major Chadwick from 1935 to 1939. This week is Talk 121. Let me go to it. This is talks between two Muslims and Ramana Maharshi. The questioner asks, has God a form? And Maharshi responds, who says so? The questioner responds, well, if God has no form, is it proper to worship idols? Maharshi says, leave God alone because he is unknown. What about you? Have you a form? And the questioner says, yes, I am this and so and so. Maharshi replies, so then you are a man with limbs about 3.5 cubits high, with a beard, etc. Is it so? And the questioner says, certainly. Excuse me, I guess I need to be retrained. Maharshi says, then do you find yourself so in deep sleep? And the questioner says, after waking, I perceived that I was asleep. Therefore, by inference, I remain thus in deep sleep also. Maharshi says, if you are the body, why do they bury the corpse after death? The body must refuse to be buried. And the questioner says, no, I am the settled jiva within the gross body. And Maharshi says, so you see that you are really formless, but you are at present identifying yourself with the body. So long as you are formful, why shouldn't you worship the formless God as being formful? The questioner was baffled and perplexed. There's a verse familiar to many of us. Lead me from the unreal to the real. It is from the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, one of the early Upanishads, and an important scripture for Advaita Vedanta. In this dialogue, we can see Ramana as he tries to lead these questioners from the unreal to the real. In the dialogue between Ramana Maharshi and the two Muslims, the discussion revolves around the nature of God, worship, and identification with the body. The conversation begins with the question of whether God has a form. let me break down the dialogue and explain it within the context of Ramana's teachings and Advaita Vedanta. The questioner asks, has God a form? And Maharshi replies, who says so? In this exchange, the questioner asks whether God has a form. Ramana responds by questioning who made the assertion that God has a form. This is a significant point in Advaita Vedanta, which emphasizes the formless nature of the ultimate reality or God. If you believe you have a form, then so does your idea of God. If you have no form, how can God have a form? How you see the world and God depends on how you see yourself. Ramana starts by asking the questioners to investigate themselves to see if they have form. Then the questioner says, well, if God has no form, is it proper to worship idols? And Maharshi says, leave God alone because he is unknown. What about you? Have you a form? The questioner has raised the concern of whether it's appropriate to worship idols if God is formless. Ramana advises the questioners to focus on their own self rather than worrying about the nature of God. He asks the questioners if they themselves have a form, continuing to direct them to self-investigation. One of the powers of Ramana's teachings is the understanding that since God is all, then it is easier to find God within yourself rather than examining the variety of the universe. Look within yourself for what is always there. That's how you find God. Ramana also says something important, that God is unknowable. Why is this? God is unknown by the mind. The mind can only know objects, and God is not an object. The God you can think of is at the same level as the ego and the world. The vast absolute Brahman is unknown by the mind. But as you dive deeper than the mind, this God is known by your own being. As your own being, are you separate from God? Are you different from God? You know God by being. So the questioner says, yes, I am this and so and so. Maharshi responds, so then you are a man with limbs about 3.5 cubits high, with a beard, etc. Is it so? The questioner is committed to the idea of their form and provides specific physical attributes with which they're identified. Ramana then challenges this identification by asking if they still perceive themselves in the same form during sleep. The questioner says, certainly. After waking, I perceive I was asleep. Therefore, by inference, I remain thus in deep sleep also. Maharshi, if you are the body, why do they bury the corpse after death? The body must refuse to be buried. The questioner argues that they remain in the same form during deep sleep because they perceive themselves as having slept when they wake up. Their waking state identification with the body is projected onto their idea of sleep. Maharshi then questions this identification with the body that by pointing out if they are indeed the body, why does the body allow itself to be buried after death? In this way, he is challenging their notion of their true identity being confined to the physical form. And the questioner then says, no, I am the subtle jiva within the gross body. And Maharshi replies, so you see that you are really formless, but you're currently identifying yourself with the body. So long as you are formful, why shouldn't you worship the formless God as being formful? The questioner responds by stating that they are the subtle jiva within the gross body. Ramana then highlights the contradiction by pointing out that if they recognize their true nature of formless, then it would be appropriate to worship the formless God. He suggests that as long as they continue to identify with the body, why not worship the formless God who can be perceived as having a form by those who identify with the body? This dialogue leaves the questioner perplexed and unable to find a satisfactory response. It challenges his notion of identifying himself solely with the physical body, and it encourages a deeper exploration of his true nature, which is formless. It seems that the questioners are unable to take this step. This dialogue highlights the profound contemplation required to understand the nature of the self, the illusion of form, and the formless aspect of God and themselves. So now we have a dialogue from Nome. If the I is formless, who experiences who experiences what?
If the I has form, then other forms are seen. If the I is formless, who experiences what? If we try to determine what it is, whatever the it is, there'll be no end. Conclusive knowledge, truly Vedanta, final knowledge, is found in the knowledge of oneself. Better than meditating upon an object is meditating upon the nature of the meditator. Bhagavan's instructions are sublime. They're perfect in their clarity, and they are all fulfilling. In any one passage, no matter how small the passage is, he shows both the reality and, out of compassion, the means to realize it as well. All that without deviating ever from the absolute, non-dual truth. And all of that is given within the shining context of His grace. It's amazing. Again, if one knows where the source of happiness is, likes and dislikes are naturally transcended. After all, your likes are all the places where you think happiness can be found. And your dislikes are all those things that you think are threatening to your happiness. But as existence does not come from another, happiness does not come from another. And as existence cannot cease to exist, likewise happiness can never be threatened. If there's an I, an embodiment, etc., there will be suffering. If there is no such misidentification, suffering becomes utterly impossible. Being is bliss, as was mentioned before. Can bliss suffer? There exists that in you which is already transcendent of all likes and dislikes. It is the real self. All that is necessary is to know it as it is. It's a knowledge of identity, not objective knowledge. So therefore, in your inquiry, do not treat the self as if it is distinct from yourself. Rather, by the inquiry, dissolve the very notion of yourself in that which is the self. Yes, it takes keen discrimination, continuous knowledge, and detachment from all that's unreal. But this is not beyond one's capacity. He said that what he realized was possible for all. That all includes you. If the discrimination were to be a thought process, it would be difficult or impossible to make it continuous. But that which discriminates, that is to say, true knowledge, is thought transcendent. That which can discern the distance or the difference between a thought and yourself is not a thought. So while on the one hand, speaking of continuous discrimination is indicative of intensity of sadhana, on the other hand is actually something quite natural. It's not natural to be ignorant. Indeed, you being knowledge itself, ignorance is completely unnatural for you, which is why you don't like it. So use the knowledge that is inherent in consciousness itself, and with your own light discriminate, always, what in truth you are. This does not require you to think about it. Thoughts about it are right, but the discrimination itself, the actual inquiry, is quite beyond the level of thought. inside you.
So now let's take a few minutes and inquire to make what Ramana has said and Nome has said our own direct experience. Notice that you exist and you know that you exist. Now inquire, investigate within yourself. Who is the one inquiring about the form of God? And about our own identity? Who is inquiring? Explore the statement, leave God alone because he is unknown. What does it mean to leave God alone? Where then do you direct the focus of your inquiry? Can the unknown nature of God be a doorway to deeper understanding and spiritual exploration? Contemplate, reflect on the identification with the body and the notion of formlessness. In what ways do you personally identify with your physical form? Can you observe the transient nature of the body and recognize the formless existence that lies beyond it? In your experience, what changes and what is always? Who am I? what is the nature of my existence? All right. Let's close with a chant. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Om. Peace, peace, peace. Questions, comments?
I liked what Nome said about meditating upon the nature of the meditator
Yes,
rather than an object or
right.
yeah.
Yes, I think that is the heart of his practice. I also kind of like this one because it was oriented around the body. And for the last few weeks, I've had enough trouble with my body that it was hard to meditate. So I feel like I faced some of that pretty directly. And it's only been in the last week or so that I've been able to start to sit down and be quiet and meditate again.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly when I was laying in the hospital bed, going through what I was going through, it was not a good time for my meditation because I was involved in the body big time.
Yeah.
I also felt like this talk was real good because here is Ramana just laying it out for these two Muslims, and they could not take the steps that he was encouraging them to take. Instead, they were still trying to deal with it with their mind, and their minds were just confused.
I'm pretty sure that confusion is not particular to Muslims, though.
Oh, yes, indeed. I have felt that confusion myself. Like I said, the 2 weeks I was in the hospital were one of those times.
I'm not sure what Ramana meant when he said about the body after you die, that the body would be struggling against being buried.
Uh-huh. I think he was just trying to find some example that might get through to those guys.
Oh,
I didn't get that either. That didn't make any sense to me. So
Well, what I said was as much sense as I could make out of it. If you're that body, how come you let them bury you? Certainly, if you're that body and let them bury you, your identity would go away. Would it go away or not go away when the body dies? And they were steeped enough in this stuff that they said, finally, no, I'm not the body, I'm the jiva. But I think if you ask an American, he wouldn't, they don't have the idea of the jiva mainly, and they wouldn't say that.
So the jiva is the spirit?
Right, the jiva is kind of the individual soul, if you will.
Soul, yeah.
So, oh, okay.
And so you have jiva as the individual soul. You have Atman, which is kind of the individualized vast absolute. And you have Brahman, which is the vast absolute. And within the scriptures, they say Atman, the individual vast absolute, is the same as Brahman, the vast absolute.
Mm-hmm.
So they say there is no difference.
Right, it's not divided.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I think one of the core principles within Advaita is this no difference.
Mm-hmm.
And that's such a powerful idea.
Oh, it is.
You know, if you hold that idea, how can there ever be wars? You know, because if there's no difference, it's like one hand hitting the other hand. What a stupid thing.
Right.
But humanity's good at being stupid. It's amazing to me that some few among us are able to rise past that stupidity and find something that they can use to try to teach us to also get past it. You know, to me, that's the miracle. Anyway, see you. It's good to be back.
It's very good to have you back.
Good to have you back, indeed.
Namaste and see you next week.
Namaste.
Namaste.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this Ramana Maharshi video, subscribe, like, and send me a comment.